What's going on, guys? Hey, it's Matt here again with Sean for another week of our cast that we do, trying to bring you guys some education video, some fun video too, to real estate. So, Sean had a great idea to bring in a special guest for today. Sean,
Yeah.
please.
Our special guest is a good friend of mine, known him for a long time, and was, believe it or not, was somebody when I got licensed 21 years ago that I looked up to, and I said, I kind of want to be like Jack Rose. So we have Jack Rose from Better Homes and Gardens, Cassidon Properties.
Realty.
That's Cassidon Realty and Property Management. Article came out last week, the end of last week, about foreclosures. How foreclosures are up nationally a big amount, 26% year over year. So, I kind of wanted to have you in because you know a lot about foreclosures, and maybe you could set the record straight with what it looks like here in Pennsylvania.
So the foreclosure market is this current market that in like 2008, everybody was. The current situation is more of a regional, actually localized market. Yes, foreclosures are up in some states. You had mentioned before we even started this, North Carolina, Florida, and Pennsylvania, they may be up, but Lehigh Valley is a little bit of a tool, and our market's different because the foreclosure market in Lehigh County is not up. I don't want to say down because foreclosures being down is a good thing, but the foreclosure count has been nowhere near what it or currently like in.
And to you have a good brushstroke of knowledge in the area, especially. I think of you when I think of distressed properties, just because of your background and knowledge of working through those. So absolutely, and it was a perfect guest. I mean. So, and a lot of people, I get buyers asking, waiting, and seeing this news, not being educated on being local. So, Jack, why is it different with us? Do you think? Why is the Lehigh Valley not being affected so much?
So I've been buying sheriff's sales. I track them every month, and it's very limited here because. What happened during COVID was we learned a couple things. So in COVID, we learned that in the Lehigh Valley, you can have a Lehigh Valley cost of. So a lot of people are working remotely, they're working at home, they're taking advantage. So to the people in, Brooklyn, Northern Jersey, people like that, they're selling their brownstone for 1.8, they're coming $800,000 on. So I don't, to put this in the simplest terms, we're Walmart. So Northern Jersey might be Macy's or something else like that to them. Yeah. To them. Mm-hmm. And they come here and it's like, but we offer good restaurants. We might not be as walkable as them in some cases. But we offer, on that $800,000 house, they're getting a half-acre lot or a full acre,
much larger piece of land.
They're getting a different life experience. That some of them.
I like that you said that too. I didn't think of it just I always take little takeaways, but at an income.
I feel sorry for people like myself who grew up here, especially the younger generation, ones who grew up here and work here. They have to compete against people who are moving here, income, New York marketplace, that, just they can't compete. We see it all the time, especially in our property management side. Put up a unit for, $1,500, $1,800 and applications, and the applications from the owners are by far financially more, advantageous because.
So, Jack, before we started, we were talking about what the different marketplaces are doing. Like you said, we're kind of shielded in the Lehigh Valley is the way I would describe it. But, I mentioned that like New Jersey, you see a lot of the days on market and amount of inventory is significantly. And I think a lot of that has to do with short-term economic effects. Gas prices are high because of the Middle East conflict. So I think that could be affecting it. But it's literally almost tripled in the last 9 months. We haven't really seen that in the Lehigh Valley. What are your thoughts on where does that go?
So before we started, you and I were talking about this a little bit in that a lot of times we see, I've been doing this longer than I want to mention.
Longer than me, which is 21 years.
And I started when I was 18 years old. But what I have seen happen a couple times, it usually starts at the beach, New Jersey. What the lag time on that is going to be this time, I don't know. I'm not in New Jersey like you are. So if you're telling me there's a 60-day market time now and it looks like it's towards 90, that's probably coming here, but that's a normal market. Mm-hmm. Okay, what we've experienced the last 5 years or so has been, and don't get me wrong, as an real estate, I'm happy to see it. But I also understand that it's got to level off. It's come a point in time, and we're getting close there where the affordability factor becomes. And I'm hearing more and more of that from agents, things like that affordability issue, something of a concern. What I'm looking at, what I think is we might be, 12 months behind. Might be working its way.
Right, and like you said, that's a normal market, and there's actually nothing wrong with a normal market. In a normal market, what should we be looking for as appreciation?
It's been my experience that somewhere 3-4% appreciation is a typical market where you're 60 days, 45, 60, maybe 75 days on market with a property that's not under duress, way, shape, or form. That's a normal market. When you put a house up on the market and you have 15 showings on the first day and have 4 offers that evening, that's not a normal market. Great for the seller at that time, but it's not normal. It's not, and it's not sustainable.
Yeah. What about and your knowledge and background on rental properties, investment, property management, all that area, not just single family primary type homes. What can you talk to about someone looking to get into investment? Looking to buy investments now versus maybe has it shifted a little bit in terms of buying that house and being able, can we talk about affordability in the Lehigh Valley specific, finding them, renting them? How does that look?
So from should I get into the market now? So I'll tell you as from an investor standpoint, we're seeing a lot of investors get into the market in the wrong conditions where they're paying too much money. They're looking at what it's going to be. I've never in my career have I seen a market. Investors are buying the property for what it might.
Hedging.
And that's wrong.
Yeah.
That's it's tough. I wouldn't advise to do. There are certain circumstances. You might be able to tell what's going to happen. You're taking a big risk. As far as home ownership, I say what I told a young man 12 months ago. Somebody I coached, I have a baseball, and I coached this young man, sons, and he got married, and I actually did his wedding.
Oh, nice.
And at the wedding, he asked me about. I don't care what you do. Because he was complaining that there was nothing his new wife liked. Mm-hmm. I said, Jake, I don't care if it's a cardboard box on a lot. But if you can live in it, get up in the morning, eat breakfast, go to work, sleep in it. I said, that was last year. So where we're talking about, because generational wealth begins for most people. And in order to play the game, got to get into the game. And that's still my advice to
Yeah.
Doesn't
Get
matter
started.
where prices are, where affordability is.
Get
It's
in.
always your best investment.
And I like I said to Jake, I said, I don't care if you like the house or not. Or I don't mean to sound like, living conditions aren't important. They are important, obviously. But, back in my day, we used to buy a row home, the South Side, fix it up, live in it, build equity, value add. We used to do those things. Sell it, buy a twin on the West Side, the same thing, until you wound up with the 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath colonial in the township. This generation today, they want what and financing options make that sometimes possible, but I love sweat equity, and I think.
What about a little bit too, just to piggyback on that, like a fix and flip type situation? People are going in. What's your outlook on those, or what are you seeing in those? Are those still something that are available, or are they coming a little bit harder to find?
Very hard to find. They're finding them.
Yeah.
Some aggressive players out there
And it's because the market's so tight, there's so little inventory, and everyone's competing for the same one. So somebody who's looking to invest in it and flip something is competing against people that are willing to take it as is and live in it.
Yeah.
I went to a house auction and it was obviously a fix. People got it eligible inside the house and the outside better. Single family home, West Side Bethlehem. To me, it was fixed and pretty. That's my term, fixed and pretty.
Mm-hmm.
It was 325, 340. Okay. My number on purchasing it, because it was probably 170. It went for 250, and there was multiple bidders, and so the profit margin, the margins are narrow.
I had one of my good friends that I went to high school here locally in the Valley in Emmaus. Same thing. I think we were up to 8 or 9 properties purchased in Emmaus and that Albertus area. And he bought his first. The last 2 we did were up in Slatington.
Yep.
I need to go to get
Yep.
my ROI. I need to move out of the area.
Yep.
I mean, I think obviously the best thing to do that anybody can do is to buy a house as far as building generational wealth. And one thing that we talk about all the time is the average age of a first-time home buyer being 40 years old is sad. I look at my son. My son's 20. And I want him to buy a house, but it's so hard to save up the money. Just pressing down on them as far as what things.
This. We've talked about this. You see people, different unique situations where families are pooling money now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in order to make it work for that generation. Of different things now that we didn't see before.
So back to the foreclosure thing. What can people do if they are starting to get notices of foreclosure in the mail from their banks or whatever? What do you think the best thing to do is at a foreclosure?
So back 2008 and so wasn't much you could do. You could prolong it. You could file. You could many times people their homes after the foreclosure, and the banks would pay you to stay and leave nicely.
Right.
Now, not underwater. So you've experienced roughly 40% equity in 5 years. So if you bought your house 10 years ago, you've got a cushion. And unfortunately, foreclosures happen for many reasons: loss of job, drugs, alcohol, divorce, things like that. Many people freeze up. But those that don't they can move. They can put it up on the market. They can move because they have equity, and they don't have to go that. The foreclosure will last on you. I always tell people who are in these situations, foreclosure lives for 7 years. You're not going to get a library card. But bankruptcy and selling the property, that lasts for 2 years. You're the mortgage guy, you know.
Exactly right.
You know,
Exactly right. Yep.
and that's a lot easier to get out of.
So if you're facing that kind of situation, back to Realtor.
Absolutely.
Get your house on the market, take the equity, move on, pay off some debt, move on, rebuild everything.
Yep.
Rather than giving it back to the bank, losing everything, and not being able to get a life 7 years.
A lot of good analogies coming out of this. Good. Yeah, but I say and just to add to that, doing the mortgage side. Not that you want to move quickly or not do your due diligence and move too fast. That side of things, that is it happens. The exposure might be there on the credit. It's the lates, 2 years of lates, and then making a payment to stay out, and then coming.
Yeah.
If you know it's going to be that way, consult an agent, get someone in there to take a look, see what you can do sooner than later, because those habitual lates over and over again are a killer. That's really what drags that credit down. And within 3 or 4 years after that, there's certain programs you can get into another house. You know.
I hate to say this, but been there, done that.
Yeah.
You know how I learned about foreclosures? It was done. So when I bought my first home when I was 18, I bought my first investment property when I was 21. Long story, but by the time I was 24, the program that I had bought changed, and it changed my income on the investment. And I am not a fan of OPM. Okay? I'm not
What's
of
OPM?
other people's money.
Oh, okay.
I am not a fan of high leverage. Not because this is what I learned back then when I was a kid. You know? But I got foreclosed on. I lost the property back to the bank. But guess lesson came out of that. I learned all about the foreclosure. So, you know, if somebody is in that situation, it's not the end of it. They may think it is. Mindset that, you know, you're rebuilding. We're going to rebuild. We're going to regroup. We're going to
Great advice.
That's awesome. So let's thank you for
you're
all
welcome.
of these questions. Covered.
No.
Really, this is a good. If you guys are out there, if you have questions, if you're facing foreclosures or difficulties, by all means, we have two fantastic people sitting here. Jack's been a very long time, extremely knowledgeable. Sean and his team as well. Reach out to a realtor, guys. Get some help. Start the ball rolling on that. The light at the end of the tunnel.
And Jack is a true legend in real estate in Lehigh Valley.
Absolutely.
If you don't know Jack, that's Jack.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So thanks again, guys. We'll catch you next week, and thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
You guys.